So I mentioned that we're in this period of the Omer, this period of counting and acknowledging. And this actually comes from this week's Torah portion, from Parshat Emor. In this week's Torah portion, Moses is relaying to the people all of the instructions for the major holidays, all of the festivals that we will observe. And it mentions Passover, talks about the sacrifices of Passover, and then it commands the people that they should count this period of 7 weeks of 7 days, making 49. And then on the 50th day, it will be Shavuot. And then Moses gives the description of what Shavuot should look like and all of the offerings that people will bring. Shavuot is 2 festivals combined into one. It is the grain offering, the grain harvest in ancient Israel, and also celebrates the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai. And then immediately after the description of Shavuot, sort of interrupting the flow of describing the cycle of holidays, there's this 1-verse interlude where Moses says, "Also, when you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap all the way to the edges of your field, or gather the gleanings of your harvest. You shall leave them for the poor and the stranger. I am the eternal your God." So there's this commandment about tzedakah, about as you are harvesting, how do you make sure to leave for people who are less fortunate than you? And then he's right back in it where he's talking about Rosh Hashanah. And it seems like a weird digression. It seems like an odd, almost like something got copy and pasted and put in the wrong place. And so I was wondering this week, why the digression? Why talk about tzedakah and why talk about it there? So Rav Meir Simcha of Dvinsk says that it's there because it is the commandment that is the essence of Shavuot. It's about the harvest, but it's also about the Torah, because you wouldn't know to leave the corners of your field and the gleanings of your harvest were it not for the Torah. And he says that you can't truly call Shavuot holy unless you participate in this mitzvah of leaving gleanings for the poor. And so he says it's the essence of Shavuot. I want to go even maybe a step further and say that it is the essence of all of the festivals of Judaism, this act of tzedakah. All of the festivals of Judaism had within them this idea of sacrifice, this idea of giving to God and also to the community some of what you have. And I think that act is about refocusing you on what you have. If you have enough to leave something for the poor, then clearly you have a lot. And in that act of intentionally setting aside and saying some of what I am blessed with shouldn't be mine, it should be for people who don't share those blessings, you get to refocus yourself on how many blessings you actually have, which is, I think, a great gift. And it is something that I think we desperately need in the world in which we live. Because we live in this world where there are constantly commercials telling us about all the things we don't have, all the things we should want. Our life will not be complete until we have the latest Xbox, the newest car, the fanciest house, whatever it is. And this keeps us in a perpetual state of maybe not attuning ourselves to the blessings that we have. And so all of these holidays constructed throughout the year as places to give of ourselves in different ways are all about trying to give us opportunities to refocus ourselves on the blessings we have. And I have a story that I wanted to tell you about that process of refocusing ourselves on the blessings we have for the kids in the room, for the kids watching online. It's about a guy named Shmuel. And Shmuel has a wife whose name is Zahava. And Shmuel has what I think is a pretty good life. He's got a wife, he's got a house, he lives in a nice town. But Shmuel doesn't see it that way. See, Shmuel has this dream that he will someday get to go and see paradise. And it's all he can think about. He wants to see and experience paradise. He talks about it all the time. And and as a result, he looks at his life and he thinks his life is shmeh compared to paradise, right? Like, it could be better. And he's talking about it all the time, and Zahava is getting fed up. And finally, Zahava drags him to the rabbi, sits him down and says, explain the paradise thing. And so Shmuel says, I have this dream to someday visit paradise, and my life here is just not what it could be, and I wanted to visit paradise. And the rabbi thinks for a long time, and he says, then I think you have to go to paradise. And Shmuel says, excuse me, what? And the rabbi says, paradise, it's not so far from here. And Shmuel says, excuse me, what? And the rabbi says, well, there's a path right behind the synagogue. And if you walk straight down that path, if you go, it's not even like a whole day's hike. The paradise is just on the other side of a couple of ridges down that path. And Shmuel is overjoyed. He is so excited. This is the best news he could possibly have heard. He jumps up. He's ready to leave. And the rabbi can see that Zahava is feeling a little sad about the possibility of Shmuel leaving and going to paradise. And the rabbi says, you know what, Zahava, sit for a minute. We'll talk about your feelings. I have something I want to say to you. But Shmuel doesn't even hear that. He is already leaving out the door. He's going to pack. It's midday. He throws some stuff in a suitcase. I don't know. What do you pack to go to paradise? And he is ready to go. He closes the door of his house just as Zahava is getting back. He kisses her on the forehead. He says, I love you, thank you, I gotta go. And off he goes back to the synagogue, finds the path. He starts walking down the path. He walks for most of the rest of the day. The sun is getting lower and lower and lower. He realizes he probably should have waited and left in the morning, but now it's too late, and this is before the invention of flashlights. And so he is not going to travel at night. He realizes he needs a place to sleep. So as it's getting dusk and dark, he finds a tree, an apple tree, just off the path. And he thinks, this is where I can sleep for the night. But he realizes that as it's getting dimmer, he has a problem, which is that he might, in the morning, wake up in the daylight, be disoriented, and not know which way down the path he was going. And he doesn't want to get on the wrong track. And so he has an idea. He says, he thinks to himself, I'm going to take off my shoes. I'm going to go back to the path. I'm going to put my shoes next to the path, pointing in the direction that I was traveling. And then I will go to sleep. And when I wake up, all I have to do is step back in my shoes and off I can go. And I'll be in paradise by lunchtime. So Shmuel goes to sleep after placing his shoes. He sleeps in anxious sleep. He's so excited. He wakes up in the morning. He picks a couple of apples. He eats them for breakfast. He steps back into his shoes and he starts to walk. He walks for not very long, a couple of hours. It's midday. He comes over a hill and he sees a town. And he thinks to himself, I found paradise. This is paradise. It was so close this whole time, I had no idea. And he starts to hurry himself. He runs towards the town. Fast as he can get there, he runs into the town. The town he lived in, he thought to himself, was so crowded and dirty, and the people there were so noisy. This town, there's just lively and delightful and clean. He sits down in the center of the square, and he just watches the people as they hustle and bustle through paradise in this beautiful, lovely town. And he's so happy. He watches children playing in the streets. He listens to the sound of the school children in the windows behind him. He is having the most wonderful day. And as the day goes on, he loses hours just sitting there. As the day goes on, he starts to see those children reuniting with their families and heading back to their homes, and he starts to notice that he's very hungry. And he thinks to himself, this town looks not unlike the town I came from. I wonder if there's a house not unlike the house I lived in. And so he starts to wander, and sure enough, exactly where he thought it would be was a house, not unlike the house he lived in. And standing in front of the house is a woman who looks very much like his wife. And she says, oh, good, you're home. Come on in. And he says, I am home. I've made it to paradise. And she says, yeah, sure, whatever. Your soup's getting cold. Come on in. So he comes in. And he sits down. Now, the house he had left was it was cluttered, and it was small, and he did not care for it. This house was homey and warm, and all the stuff in the house created this sense of familiarity. And he sat down at the table, and there was this steaming hot bowl of soup, and he starts to eat this bowl of soup, and it is the best soup he has ever had in his entire life, and he is overjoyed at this lovely woman, whoever she is, who has made this wonderful soup, and he is having having the best dinner of his life. He eats, he's so full, he's satisfied. He goes upstairs to the room that looks an awful lot like his bedroom. He climbs into a bed that is much nicer than the bed he remembers, and he falls asleep into the deepest, richest sleep of his entire life. The next morning, he wakes up, and this woman, who looks a lot like his wife, she feeds him a lovely breakfast, and then she hands him his tools and sends him off to work. And Shmuel thinks for a while that it's odd that one should have to do work in paradise. But then he thinks about it and he says, even here there's stuff that needs to get done, and I guess we all contribute. And so he goes to do the work. But his old job that he had back before he went to paradise, he didn't care much for it. It was tedious. It was annoying. He didn't like his coworkers. This work was similar, but he liked it so much better. He felt like it was important work. He felt like he had something important that he was doing in the world. He felt like he really got along well with his coworkers. He was overjoyed. That night he came back to this house for another bowl of the most amazing soup he'd ever had. And he continued to live his life this way, day after day after day, overjoyed. And sometimes people would try and convince him that he wasn't, in fact, in paradise, that he'd never actually left. But he could never be convinced of such a thing because he just absolutely knew that he had gone on this journey and come to this place that was full of blessings. And he stopped after years even thinking about how he had gotten there. He was so certain he lived in paradise. He stopped thinking about that day he went to meet with the rabbi. He certainly stopped thinking about the fact that Zahava had stayed to talk to the rabbi afterwards. And he never thought about what they talked about. He had no way to know, of course, that the rabbi had said to Zahava when he left, all you have to do is follow him at a distance. And after he goes to sleep, turn his shoes. Sometimes finding the blessings in our lives can be an act of great transformation. And sometimes finding the blessings in our lives need only be a small turning. My hope for you as we continue these 20 more days of the Omer is that you have many opportunities for small turnings towards your blessings. Shabbat Shalom.